Hello guys, so we're back again for another exciting show.
Hi guys.
My brother Lucas and me, Tom Antos, and today's show is about the GH5 camera again. There's a lot of questions. I've put out already a few videos and it seems like everybody's really interested in, like I said, in the GH5. So I figured that I would kind of compare the camera to some of the other cameras. I'm going to talk about different cameras, and literally if you guys have any questions about the GH5, now's your time to ask me, whether it's just specifically about the GH5, how to use it, things like that, or just, you know, comparing it to other cameras. Now the reason why I kind of wanted to do this video is because I think GH5 stands in a class of its own, where it's very, basically because of the way the camera is designed and the features that it has, it can be compared to a lot more other cameras than versus, for example, like even the GH4 or here I have an older Sony camera, but it's going to be used as an example of like comparing it to like Sony A6300, 6500, you know, other cameras like that of that caliber. So I think that's the cool thing about the GH5 is it can be compared to these smaller, you know, and a lot more affordable cameras, all the way up to really professional cameras, because it kind of stands in a kind of again, like this kind of a middle ground, I guess, right? Where
it's between, you know, like high-end pro and you know, and still consumer / pro.
So hopefully you guys are joining up here. If you have any questions, like I said, leave them in the comments, and Lucas is gonna be getting back to you guys, or like I said, whatever we can answer on air, I'll answer on air here. Let's see here who's signing up, and also if you guys have anything you want to say about the camera and stuff like that, then feel free to do so. I see we have people from Germany. Actually, let me know. Usually we do this thing where just ask you guys where are you joining us from, and even what time is it over there. It's always interesting to see where we got people coming in from. But anyways, okay, so I'll continue about the cameras. So like I said, the cool thing about these cameras is that it's you know, they're like I said, there's a lot to choose from these days when it comes to cameras. So like I said, there's different sizes, different features and all that stuff, and different prices, which is really good. So, you know, obviously right now out of these ones that I have up here, which is the, you know, Panasonic GH5, that's the most expensive one. It's going to be just under $2,000. GH4 still an amazing camera, and this one right now, what is the price?
Sorry, the video is choppy. There's nothing. Is there anything we can do about that?
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's quite choppy.
Are people? Let us know, guys, if you're having problems watching the video.
Yeah, some people are saying it's choppy.
Yeah, it's
your
just
video codec is wrong.
The what?
One person says your video codec is wrong. I'm not sure about
well,
that.
it's not us.
It's we use every time.
Yeah, no. It's
unless unless maybe it was a response to somebody else, but.
No, but are people saying it is choppy?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's nothing we can do about this, unfortunately, because it's the Restream, right? That the service that we use so we can kind of send the signal to various websites. That's what's they were sending us messages that they had some problems, but let me actually check on something quickly. In the meantime, you guys can still talk about the camera, so let us know.
Hopefully the audio is good, so you can hear us.
Yeah, here it's Restream that's having some problems, so
we apologize for that, but hopefully the audio is still good. Actually, we can check.
Yeah, I can't check it right now, so maybe you can check it. Anyway, so like I said, we'll just continue here. We got the cameras, and like I said, the good thing is that these cameras are, like I said, they're all affordable these days. And you know, they'll come at different prices. Like I said, this one's $2,000, just under $2,000. This is a GH5. GH4, how much was it again, Lucas? Because now it came down in price, right?
Oh,
you remember?
I better check, because there are promotions, but it's close to 1,000. But I think.
Oh, so almost like half the price of the GH5. And it's very close, very close in features to this one. So that's the good thing. Let me see here.
Right now it says 1,500, but I'm pretty sure I saw it at $1,200 a few days ago on B&H. So I guess because yeah, they are having promotions for this camera, unsurprisingly.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And any other deals?
I don't see any other deals. Yeah. I mean, you know, well, on this the Sony A6300, you can get for sure deals, you know, now, because the 6500 is the one that's, you know, the most popular. So it's always good to be. It's always a benefit if you're not, you know, going for the latest and camera.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't really, because oftentimes it all depends. You know, if there is like a killer new upgrade to the camera, then I guess it makes sense to go for the latest one. It really depends on your work situation, on what projects you shoot.
So yeah, I mean, like I said, lot to choose from these days. This is the Sony. This is actually the older one, Sony NEX 5R, which I still love, and I did a bunch of videos of kind of about this camera and kind of showing you examples of what you can shoot. And it's right now, I mean, it's no longer even being manufactured, but you can buy it used if you're lucky to find it for even like $150. I found it on eBay, and it's a great camera, especially if you're a beginner. I would say this is something you want to get into. And I mean, look at the camera. It's just the camera itself it's tiny compared to some of these other cameras. Like even the GH5, which is already a small camera, seems like a monster next to this one. This thing's tiny, and this is, I'll tell you guys, not much smaller than some of the other Sony cameras, like the what do you call it, the Sony A6300 or Sony, you know, A6500, for example. Now the price differences, I guess Sony A6500 would be the one that's the closest, right? To like price-wise, right? To the GH4.
Sorry?
The Sony A6500 would be the one that's the closest price-wise. Yeah. Can you check actually maybe the price?
Okay, hold on. See. Fortunately, my computer is slowing down a lot.
Let me check one last thing here. Something here, checking with the internet. All right. So
yeah,
hopefully
it's costing $1,400 actually.
Oh, okay.
So body only, right?
Body only.
Yeah.
Well, the GH4 also, right? That was a body only price, right?
Actually, here is there's they have a promotion, $400 off. So for $1,700 you can get 2 lenses with the Sony A6500.
Oh,
obviously
okay.
They're not, you know, they're like this. Those are the you know those are good zooms, but they're not obviously fast. But it's the 16 to 50 and 55 to 210 millimeters. So those are good set of lenses, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I mean, the reason why I want to compare this camera, like I said, is because it's the GH5. I think is kind of unique in the sense that it's you can compare it to these, you know, really affordable, you know, like whether it's Sony point and shoot cameras or like the mini DSLMs, like the Sony A6500, 6300, comparing it obviously to the GH4. Yet, you know, and especially even in the price, like this is still more affordable than Sony A's, you know, A7S II, for example, which is a great stills camera and a pretty good video camera, but it's not amazing. And I say that only because it's those cameras, just like for example, like the smaller Sony cameras, like the A6300, 6500. Those cameras are designed primarily to be photo cameras, not video cameras. Whereas that's where the GH5 kind of stands out, is that it's designed to be a stills camera, and it's actually an amazing stills camera. The only, you know, thing I would say is that a lot of stills photographers are saying that you know, would maybe, like, especially if you're doing portraiture or if you really want that shallow depth of field, then you know, you're shooting on a micro four thirds image sensor, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult to achieve that. But it's easier to achieve, for example, longer, you know, like telephoto shots. So if you want to get wildlife or sports, for example, photography, it's an amazing camera for that. But like I said, aside from it being a photography, you know, camera, it's actually a really well designed video camera. And what I mean by that is that it's not like Panasonic kind of, you know, like with a lot of these other manufacturers, after the war, it's kind of, after they've designed a good photo camera, they kind of were like, okay, what kind of video features can we add? No, they were actually working, sometimes you might even say primarily making sure that this is a good video camera. And that's the cool thing. Not only that, but it's not a video camera like basically that you can even compare, I would say, to a lot of home video cameras, right? There's a lot of amazing home video cameras these days that you can get, because this thing shoots in some pretty insane specs and has some really advanced features and things like that. And that's what I'm saying, that you can even compare this to cameras that are 2 or 3 or even, you know, 5 times its cost. So for example, I'm working on a video where I'm comparing this to the URSA Mini 4.6K / you know, Pro cameras. And the reason why I'm going to compare this is because in many ways it's, you know, it has the same features, and in some ways it actually has more features than the URSA you know, Mini cameras. So that's the cool thing about this this camera. Now I would say to get the best out of it, you probably want to kind of pair it up with something like what I have up here, which is the Atomos. This is the Atomos Ninja Inferno. It's a great monitor. Not that you really need them. I mean, the LCD on the back of this camera is actually pretty good compared to, like, let's say the Sony cameras, like Sony A6300 or A6500. Horrible the screen. I mean, it's okay when you're taking photos, but the second you switch to video mode, the screens get very dim. And I actually shot a music video on the A6300 in Ecuador. It was, you know, super hot and sunny outside, and the camera kept on overheating, and I had problems seeing what I'm actually recording, so I had to resort a lot of times to using external monitor anyways. Well, this thing is a external monitor and a recorder, so that's the beautiful thing about the Atomos Ninja Inferno. And it's almost like it has, I would say, some of these features that were designed in the, you know, Ninja Inferno are almost like perfectly designed for the GH5. And what I mean by that is it accepts some of the modes, accepts the, for example, anamorphic. That's another thing that this camera has that many other cameras don't have. Even very expensive film cameras, like, you know, Sony, for example, FS7, FS5, they don't have the anamorphic mode. But this GH5, even though it's a point-and-shoot DSLM, it has those really advanced features. It records internally 4K 60p. It can do 1080p at 180 frames per second, which is higher frame rate than the URSA. So, you know, the URSA, for example, you know, again, great cameras, and one, I would say, feature that where the URSA really stands up, again, I would say above this one, is the fact that you can record RAW. But, you know, it's not, RAW is not something that everybody's going to be using. I would say it's more for a kind of film workflow or music video that shoots, or something where you have a lot more time in post-production. But if you're doing stuff that's like live to television or things like that, then you're probably not even going to be using the RAW function in the URSA Mini. So in that case, this camera is, I would say, comparable in many ways, and you know, maybe even better. Another, I would say, advantage that the URSA has, the at least the 4K and 4.6K and the Pro, is the fact that it has the, you know, really nice wide dynamic, you know, the image latitude. This camera is good. It's, you know, definitely a lot better. When you get the upgrade, you're gonna have to pay $100 for this, unfortunately, for this upgrade. But you can shoot them in the Panasonic's V-Log profile, which is their kind of log profile. Then this camera captures supposedly around 12 and a half stops of light. In reality, how much it captures, I'm gonna show you guys when I do my comparison video of the GH5 to the URSA, because I actually have a dynamic range test chart, and I'm gonna be shooting with that, so I'll kind of actually show you in reality how many stops it captures. But it's pretty good. It handles the, you know, the, like I said, very harsh contrasty scenes pretty well. One thing, you know, I'll notice is just right away when I was like shooting this, you know, for example, right next to the URSA Mini, is that, yeah, the URSA Mini just has a lot nicer highlight roll-offs and all that stuff. So that's the big difference, right? When it comes to URSA, is that it has that little bit of extra quality, but it's not something that most people are going to use anyway. So that's why for a lot of people, shooters, I would say this is probably the camera you want to go with, because it's less than half the price of the URSA Mini, 4.6K, and for example, comparing it to the you know, 4.6, what is it? Yeah, URSA Mini Pro 4.6K. The names are getting more and more complicated. This camera is 1/3 of the price. So, I mean, it's really, like I said, it's amazing in that sense. and it has those features. It has the 10-bit recording, which is something that no other consumer video or these DSLR type cameras even offer. As 10-bit recording, records 180 frames per second slow motion, which is an amazing thing. It has black profiles, has all these really cool features. It has even proper audio connections. Now the only thing is, for that you're gonna have to get their Panasonic's extension, which kind of goes up here on the top, and that will actually give you proper XLR audio connections that you would put up here. You can monitor the audio. You have actual physical knobs for adjusting the audio levels, all that stuff. So I mean, when you buy it with the audio, I think module, you pretty much have like a full-blown video camera that you can use for broadcast work, no problem. Because like I said, it shoots 4K, 10-bit, all that stuff. Now the only, I would say the biggest advantage of using like an external recorder, like the one that I have here, is when you want to utilize the anamorphic better mode and capture the anamorphic basically, because you can capture the anamorphic internally, but you want to capture the anamorphic in 4K, 60 frames per second, or just even if you want to record the regular 4K video but at 60 frames per second, which this camera can do, in 10-bit, then that's when this recorder is really helpful. Also, this recorder is just, slash monitor is helpful, and just being able to monitor the shots. Like I did some shots at night where I just had the camera up here, and it's a pretty small light package, and it was easy for me to just kind of work with this camera like this fast. But having this big display right here in front of my face allows you to nail focus perfectly. I mean, like, and I was shooting with a Canon 50mm f1.4 lens with a Metabones adapter, so they opened all the way. So in the middle of the night we were shooting, so the depth of field was very narrow. And just by looking at the Ninja Inferno, because it is a 1080p display, and getting all that color information and HDR basically, that because this camera will send out the raw, you could say almost data, or the VLOG, for example, profile uncompressed, and it will go in here in Ninja Inferno. You can view it as a log image, you can view it as a Rec 709, or you can do what they call is like an HDR mode, where you can kind of really choose what's the luminosity kind of range in your image that you're really interested in, and you can adjust that and see perfectly in that case what the camera sees, and you can nail the focus every time and all that stuff. So that's like I would say a killer combo in that sense. Any questions we get?
Yeah, we have quite a few questions.
Yeah. Okay.
About the cable that you have for the what cable are you using?
The cable is actually I'll tell you guys about my setup. So cage is CAME-TV cage, which I already kind of showed in a previous video, but I'll provide the links in the description of the video so you guys can check it out. CAME-TV cage, and this is just one of their two cages. There's another cage that I'll probably end up swapping to, because this one is great, and it's good if you're gonna have the audio module, because this handle's kind of adjusted so that the audio module will fit here. But for me, I'm not gonna be using the audio module, and I would like the handle to be able to remove quickly, so I can then kind of have the camera even smaller if I don't need the handle. And they have another cage basically that has that. It's the same thing, just the handle is removable and it's attached a little bit further back. But great cage. And then on top of that, I have it's an Atomos Ninja Inferno. I have the Atomos cable, which is a great cable because it's interesting. Like before I was using, if you watch my original, the unboxing / initial test video of the GH5, I used the Atomos with it, and I used this kind of a silvery kind of HDMI cable, and it did its job. But it was, first of all, it was too long. I had to like coil it up, whereas this thing has this spring you can see up here, so you can stretch this quite a bit. So that's a nice thing. But if you don't need it that long, then it kind of coils back up. And then another thing is that the connections on here are actually pretty solid. Like I would say that the most solid HDMI connections, because this is all metal, these plugs themselves, for the full metal. And when you put it in there, like up here, once it's plugged in well into the HDMI connection, this cable up here is not bending. It's not basically going to come off, or at least it doesn't feel like it will. But I guess I can update you guys in a few months. So that's what I'm using there.
Okay. Maybe we can get into this now. What about the V-Log on the Panasonic camera, and like how does it match compared to S-Log on the Sony's?
V-Log on the Panasonic. It's log is log. It basically, what it just means is you're trying to utilize the the maximum range of the sensor, but without having to record the raw, so that you still in an 8-bit or 10-bit or whatever the bit images that you're recording, you're trying to basically get more of that dynamic range that the sensor in reality can capture. Because if you're just recording standard video, you're going to be limited around 6.5, 7 stops of light, because that's what standard Rec 709 at least video is limited to. So now, how does it compare? It's going to be a flat looking image, meaning it doesn't have a lot of color, it doesn't have as much contrast. It's harder to nail focus if you're shooting in that, unless you have, like I said, an external monitor that will real-time convert it. So that is all similar. The only thing I would say is because the image coming out of the Panasonic GH4 doesn't capture as wide of a dynamic range, that simply means that the flat image profile doesn't need to be as flat. So it's a little bit, has a bit more life to it, a bit more contrast than, for example, what the Sony A7 S2 or A6300, 6500 cameras will output. So it's easier to work in that sense. Like, let's say if you were a shooting vlog and then you didn't have any LUTs or anything like that, and you needed to manually adjust the contrast and colors to make it look like proper video, it's gonna be a bit easier working with that. And on the flip side, the Sony cameras, like I said, they can capture more dynamic range. In my tests, the A6300, I haven't done tests with the A6500 yet, to comparing it with the dynamic range. But from what I hear, it's very similar to the A6300. The A6300 can capture 14 stops of light, but in reality, like when that was an S-Like3, and S-Like3 at that point was breaking down because you're recording to an 8-bit image codec, and that's where the problem is, using log profiles in these cheaper cameras, right? Whereas that's the amazing thing about the GH5s. You can shoot VLOG and you don't have to worry about it. Versus, for example, shooting VLOG, which is exactly the same VLOG, the same dynamic range pretty much as the GH5. On the GH4. On the GH4 you're shooting VLOG. I did a video about it, comparing it, recording VLOG internally into the GH4 versus an external Atomos recorder. In that case, it was the Atomos Shogun, I think, yeah. Or Ninja, no, Assassin, I think. But one of those, the older recorders. But when I did comparisons there, you can see there was a huge advantage in shooting to an external recorder. With the GH5, if you're just going to be shooting 1080p video or normal 4K up to 30 frames per second, the camera already records in a 10-bit image codec. So you don't always need an external recorder like the Atomos. Where Atomos, I would say, comes in handy is when you want that 4K at 60 frames per second. You want better to be able to see the anamorphic mode better, like actually displayed properly, and also if you just want even better codec, because we can record to ProRes. Versus this camera, right now it still records to basically a Panasonic MP4 enwrapped kind of a image profile, but when you're recording 10-bit, right now at least as of this video, right, when you're recording 10-bit internally in the camera, whether it's 1080p or 4K, and then you try to edit that footage, and I know I've been getting some questions from people, do I have any problems with it? I mean, we've had problems, but we were editing that footage, right? Mm-hmm. You actually had, I would say, more experience editing this footage, right? So what was it your general?
I'm actually okay. I think I was editing 8-bit footage.
Well, 8-bit has problems, but 10-bit also had it basically had bigger problems. But what was the problem then with the?
Well, I mean, I couldn't play it back just like with VLC or any other program I have on my laptop, just for a video playback. But once in Adobe Premiere, then there I can edit and see the video files. So it works then. But then once obviously we render. The last video I did was a 4K 60 frames per second video, and from the GH5, right? And so once rendered, it was fine. I could play it back on my laptop, but and for editing too, in Premiere I could do it. It's just the problem was when I wanted to to just actually preview the video clips beforehand, right? Mm-hmm. Outside of Premiere, so then I couldn't do it. It was too choppy, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I found out though, even with the GH4, like, because you're using the VLC media player, right? Yeah, I found that the VLC media player, it's weird. It can, I guess it's designed more to like watching already, like web friendly kind of,
like the
codecs.
The output codecs, not the codecs that you
exactly.
use while.
So I also had problems, even on my the beast that we built, the 4K video editing desktop, I couldn't really play it. Whereas the same footage I put in Premiere or Resolve played perfectly fine. So I think that was just a problem with the media player. But I know people have had problems, and I've had that too, especially with the 10-bit footage that comes off of this camera, is because it's not so much that there's a problem with the camera. It's just it's a brand new codec, and Adobe has actually admitted that there are some spokesperson at NAB that kind of talked about it, and they said that Adobe's trying to catch up with all these new codecs that come out, and one of the most highly requested one was the new 10-bit codec coming off of the GH5, but they just weren't able to. They were behind, and they said they don't want to release a codec support for something that they haven't fully tested. So they said that actually by June they think they're gonna have the fully updated codec for the GH5. So basically, long story short, if you're shooting on the GH5 in 10-bit and you load it into Premiere, you might have problems. It's not actually 100%, because I've sometimes loaded footage, no problem, and then other times I've loaded the footage and it literally recognizes it only as an audio file, and you can't see the video. And I know we've had that problem actually before with G85 footage, right? Where we had to change, what we just did is change the extension name, right?
Yeah, well...
It's like a weird workaround.
No, I think it was actually finally... Okay, so one time, yeah, we just changed from, from MP4 to MPG. Then next time I had a problem, I also ran into the same problem. I changed the extension to MPEG.
Oh, okay.
But actually, the solution was problem was with the cache. Actually, so
cache
I guess
files.
maybe somebody runs into it. Yeah, basically, when you're importing files and your video files are just recognized as like audio files, for example, then or one time actually the ends of the video clip were cut off, like the audio would cut off. The video would go all the way, but the audio would cut off. So we tried, yeah, it worked with changing the extensions, but actually the problem is if you clear your cache, also that will fix the problem. It's basically when you've got files of the same name in your cache, then that's where the problem is. So
especially when you're shooting with like I guess the generic names that come off of these cameras,
right?
It's chances of having the same name of files that are named the same. If you shooting a lot of, like, we're constantly shooting stuff and putting new files, editing, shooting new stuff, so eventually we're gonna have files that are the same name. And I guess if you don't clear a cache, then Adobe Premiere is then thinking, well, that's the file I used a few months ago, when in fact it's not, and something's not matching. So yeah, that's one tip actually. If you guys are having problems, clear the cache. Most of the time will work. Now I did have, like I said, so maybe I also had that problem with the cache.
Already named the files.
Yeah, maybe that's what the problem was. Maybe that I had, but all I remember is I renamed the extension and it worked.
Yeah.
But if I'll tell you guys, if I know some people out there had huge problems just even being able to play these files, like the 10-bit files coming off of GH5 in their computer in Adobe Premiere specifically. And so then I would just say, wait till June. If you can't, download the free version of DaVinci Resolve and edit in that one, because DaVinci Resolve plays it no problem. So it's, yeah, I would say that's the one thing you gotta sort of wait for. But that's not so much fault of Panasonic. It's just new technology and new things get invented, and all the other companies are kind of work in that same spectrum. They have to sort of try to update the older things, right? So so that's kind of what's happening.
I mean, in terms of just going back to what you were talking about, we don't the question about what's the bit rate on the Shogun Ninja recorder versus the 150 megabits. I don't think it's megabytes rate in on the GH5.
Well, right now the GH5 is limited to 150, right?
Right.
So 150, which is actually pretty good comparing it to like some of the Sony cameras. But you're getting that's another big advantage, is you're getting, the codec is still, it's an MPEG basically codec, so it's still compressed pretty heavily. So 10-bit is obviously good, it's having extra bits of color, but when you're trying to cram basically more bits of color and still trying to compress it, it's at the end of the day, sometimes you won't even see a big advantage of shooting then 10-bit versus 8-bit if you compress it so heavily, because you have compression artifacts. So that's where it's nice having an external recorder like this one that, for example, can shoot in ProRes and can shoot all the way to HQ, 422. Like it is amazing, because you're getting basically, now the data rates are going to be huge depending on which codec you choose, because this one has lots of different flavors of ProRes. But if you go with the highest one, it's actually the files I think are going to be even bigger than the raw data, or they're almost the same as the raw data coming off of the URSA Mini. Bigger than, for example, if you're shooting raw on the URSA Mini in the 4:1 compressed RAW. it's actually, those files are actually smaller than the ProRes that coming off of this. That's like 444, basically 10-bit recording. So you can get amazing image quality. And you know, like I said, the ProRes, I think it's a tried tested kind of a codec that works well, great for color, you know, grading, all that stuff. So it's definitely something I would recommend, you know, recording in. Is I would say that codec versus the internal MPEG. Interesting this thing is going to be to see once GH5 as the new basically update is released, where they allow you to record in the, I think it's 400 or I think 400 or
it's
above.
Going to be, yeah, the maximum on this camera is going to be 400 megabits
per second, but that's not released yet.
Yeah,
so we can't record in that yet.
And for those who need to have, you know, the newest SD cards, right? Because
oh yeah, because that's a big problem. So
like
you're gonna need SD cards that are super fast. Like basically, it's the new type of SD cards that are as fast as the CFast cards, right? Basically, CFast 2. So they're not cheap. That's one thing.
Well, I still haven't seen like there's. Well,
and that's where I would say having the Atomos thing is amazing. I mean, here I have their there's actually one of their they partnered with G-Tech, so I have one of the, you know, official G-Tech drives, and this drive is just feels solid. It's actually full metal body. It's no longer any of these plastic caddies that they had before, and it's just an amazing what's it called solution for recording lots of high bit data, basically images, because you're recording directly to an SSD. It's cheaper actually than buying SD cards or CFast cards, and it's an SSD, meaning you can plug it into a, you know, SSD base or, you know, whatever adapters that you have, and you can plug it into, whether it's you're working with Mac or PC, and you can directly then edit this footage right off of those SSDs. You don't even have to worry about transcoding or basically copying the footage over. Whereas with SD cards, you kind of can't do that. And like I said, it's SD cards, even like the newest, latest, there's been some horror stories that people had where they'll basically buy this expensive SD card, and they're then trying to cram all that data rate, you know, it's like really maximum, like let's say 400 megabits per second or whatever it is that their device records in, and they're recording it, and technically those SD cards can keep it, but the problem is heat dispersion. You have this little card that's all plasticky, and in some cases literally the SD card melted. So people kind of had, not only did they lose money with the SD card, but they had problems with their camera after, because you have all this plastic in there. Nice thing here with the GH5 is that it actually has 2 slots, so you have 2 cards, so you can be doing backup. And I would recommend, probably if you're recording to high data rates, you probably want to have 2 mediums that you want to record in. So 2 SD cards simply means you're recording, you know, spending double the money then, because like I said, one card could fail on you. They do melt or overheat or just malfunction. So whereas SSDs are a bit more reliable, so that's a nice advantage.
You want to talk about
other questions?
Well, there are a lot of questions.
So let's go through them.
Now we also have some video submissions, so we'll get to
yeah, we're gonna show some of the submissions.
I don't know, like, so in general, I mean, we talked about it, like that's pretty much what we're talking about for the last 15 minutes. But you want to address maybe in general what are like the big color space differences between all these cameras? I guess did we like cover that, or you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I mean, I can say this.
The URSA. We said, you know, this video is also about the URSA. The URSA is not on the table because we are filming with it.
Yeah.
We don't have a second one, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, you wanna.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I mean, starting with the smallest, like the point and shoot, you know, DSLMs. You know, this is the Sony NEX thing, but this is pretty much identical to like the in terms of like the size and a lot of the codec features and stuff. To, for example, the Sony A6500 or 6300 or A6000, for example, or even like the Sony A7S II. Great cameras, amazing photo cameras. When it comes to recording video, it's like I said, the video was not a priority in these cameras, so they record a compressed MPEG image, or actually it's XAVC, slightly different codec, but also it's 8-bit only. So it's not only is it heavily compressed, but it's 8-bit. So that's one thing you gotta kind of keep in mind. I think the H6500 has addressed some of that. They allow you to record now in higher bit rates, so that's a nice thing. But it's still 8 bits, so it has 8 bits of color. So that's altogether, I forget now the math, but it's like 8 bits for each channel, which is red, green, and blue. And then you have how much does that come out to? It's like.
Let's not get into math because
it's
confusing. It's just
it is.
From the practical level, like what's the big differences in the color spaces, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm saying it's it's enough color space. And here's the thing about 8-bit, because many people think, oh, 8-bit is horrible, we should be upgrading everything to 10-bit, even displays and everything, and that's not the case. 8-bit is a great display codec, or basically format, meaning 8 bits of color. You have just enough basically colors where you can display basically what our eyes perceive, what the human eye perceives. So because of that, if your final image is an 8-bit, that's totally fine. Given if the compression ratio is really good and all that stuff, then the image can look really great. Problem is when you're recording in 8-bit in a camera, any camera, if you're just going to be recording, let's say, to standard video directly, and then you're not going to do anything with it, you're just going to record an 8-bit and then output that same 8-bit image, it's going to look great. But of course, that's not how many of us use these cameras. We use these because they have S-Log or S-Log2, S-Log3, which is trying to cram more dynamic range information. It's shooting these flat image profiles. What that basically means is you're trying to cram all that information to an 8-bit image. Then you take that image, put it in your editing application, color grading application, whatever it is that you use, and then you're playing and you're basically pulling and pushing some of these bits of colors. So when you're color grading, essentially what you're doing is you're expanding certain range of colors, making that bigger, more noticeable, while you're taking other range of colors and contracting them or just completely getting rid of them. Well, then what happens is at the end of the day is if you expand an image, like let's say 8 bits of color, and you're trying to now have that basically take up, let's say, 12 or 14 bits of color, well, obviously it's not there. So meaning you're just going to be duplicating. So there's going to be less graduation. You're not going to see as many kind of smoother change of colors or shades or things like that of colors. And that's when the big problem is. So when you're color grading, if you're not going to color grade the footage, then it's perfectly fine. But if you're going to be color grading and adjusting and doing all those things to your image, then yes, having more bits of information is important, because at the end of the day, you want to end up with a nice looking 8-bit image. But if you're starting with an 8-bit image, you're throwing away a lot of the colors, zooming in on other colors, and then you're outputting that as an 8-bit image, well, that 8-bit image is looking more like a 4-bit image, or maybe even in some cases 2-bit image. Whereas, for example, you're shooting on cameras that can shoot in higher bit rate, and here's the thing, GH4 shoots in the same thing, 8 bits of image, internally, but it can actually output in 10 bits, so that's a nice thing. So if you're using an external recorder, like I have up here with the GH5, then it's totally fine. You're kind of skipping around that problem, and also the problem with the compression. So that's why I would say the Sony point and shoots or DSLM cameras or the Canon, all of the Canon DSLM cameras, none of them come close to what the GH5 can do. And that fact is that GH5 can now internally record 10 bits, meaning you're starting with more bits of color. So after you're done color grading your image, especially if you're really going to push it, it doesn't look as bad as basically some of coming off of the image coming off of some of the other cameras. Because you're still going to end up with an 8-bit image most cases. Now some people are finished in 10-bit now already, but like I said, you're started with more colors to begin with, and that's the advantage of, for example, then having the really higher end, pro kind of cinema cameras like the URSA, for example, Mini 4.6K Pro cameras, or let's say the red cameras, Auray cameras, like all those, or C, for example. 500, for example, Canon cameras, like the cinema line cameras. That's where the advantage basically is in shooting those higher bit rates, is because you're still going to end up with a lower bitrate image, but that lower bitrate image is going to look a lot better.
Okay, and a good follow-up question, I think. You might have to think about it a little bit, but what's in common between those 4 cameras?
Uncommon?
What is common? Like,
what is common?
What do they have in common?
Well, I would say what's common between the ones here I have on the table is the size. The size is, they're workable cameras. Like I said, this thing, if I were to take off the monitor, this is pretty much the same size as the GH4, and it's, like I said, obviously bigger than this camera. But if you compare it to, let's say, the Canon DSLRs or Sony DSLM cameras like Sony A7S II, then it's pretty much the same in size. Weight, there's slight differences, but basically what I just mean is that they're cameras that you can grab with one hand. You can work with these, you can, even if you want to sneak into places where you're not allowed to shoot, just kind of passive at looking as a tourist, and probably not with the monitor in that case, but that's the cool thing, is you can take that off and you can still record 10-bit with this camera. Internally you have all these pro specs, but it's in a small form factor, so you can go with this camera, look just like a regular tourist, just have the camera hanging off your neck, but getting really nice quality shots with it. So That's the big advantage, I would say, of these smaller cameras, and that's what's kind of cool about the GH5 is that it's a camera that offers and competes literally with some of those big professional cinema cameras that you would never in a million years would be able to pass off as just like an average, camera that you're just traveling with or taking photos. So, when you're shooting with bigger cameras, that's the thing. The whole thing becomes bigger. The whole production becomes bigger because you're not going to be able to sneak into locations. You're going to have to need bigger camera support equipment because the cameras are much larger. So, for example, a gimbal for this Panasonic GH5, I can have this tiny little, for example, my favorite new one right now that I'm using is the KMTV Optimus, the little pistol grip gimbal. You put the camera under, and it's tiny. The whole setup. You can operate it with one hand, and you can even use it if you want to for vacation videos. With the URSA, forget about it. I mean, you need this huge gimbal, and then once you have that gimbal, the whole thing's so heavy that you probably won't be able to carry it for a long time with your arms. So then you need this camera support above your head. It just looks like a crazy thing. Even tripods are going to be bigger. Tripod heads are going to be bigger. Cranes are going to be massively bigger because they need to be able to support that bigger camera, bigger batteries, all that stuff. So that's where you're kind of talking about, like I said, you're going into a whole other spectrum or type of production when you're shooting with like the cinema style cameras, bigger cameras. Whereas these ones, that's what's in common about these cameras.
Okay. Okay. It's in terms of the URSA Mini. What's like the total cost of the of what you should have in the kit, like in your rig? Or do you have an idea? Somebody?
I mean, it depends what you're shooting. If you're shooting, also if you're shooting with the URSA Mini Pro or 4.6K, I would say this: if you're shooting a lot of stuff that's ENG type work, maybe even documentaries where you're gonna be kind of running and gunning, then URSA, I would say, I think it makes more sense to spend that extra $1,000 and get the URSA Mini Pro for $6,000 basically, whereas the URSA Mini 4.6K is $5,000. The reason why is because you're gonna get all these other features like the built-in NDs. It means you can then literally with that camera, you don't need anything else. You have the side grip, you have built-in NDs. You're gonna need a battery. You're gonna need a battery. So battery you're gonna have to invest in, and the cards, right? The CFast or the really fast SD cards, which the URSA Mini Pro support. So you're gonna need that, but otherwise you don't need anything else. It has a great LCD you can see, so you can with that run and gunning, and the camera is actually pretty nice. Like once you put the battery on the back and you're not using a big lens, basically it's balanced nicely with that side handle. So literally you would say $6,000 plus. You probably need at least 2 batteries, V-mount batteries that will run you around around $300. You can find some like the Max Oak batteries that I showed. Then they come already with a charger, so you don't need to spend money for that. And the cards, you're probably going to spend another $1,000 basically for the cards and batteries. So $7,000. You have a amazing pro cinema camera that can also be used for run and gunning. Now, if you want to be using it for kind of like I said, bigger setups, or for example, if you're shooting with the URSA Mini 4.6K, you're definitely going to need the ND filters. But not only that, you need ND filters and with an IR cut filter in there because that camera doesn't have it. So then you probably gonna, instead of stacking 2 filters, you're probably gonna get a matte back. In that case, means you gotta have rails. To have rails, you have to have a whole support, the rig support, and probably with a lot of these, like the ones that I reviewed, you're gonna then get a shoulder support, which is nice, and an extra handle so you can operate on your shoulders, things like that. You're gonna get a top handle with the camera then. With that rig, but yeah, then the whole thing is going to cost you with the matte packs and all those things. You're spending another, I think, minimum $2,000. So then the URSA Mini 4.6K will give you, you could say, a bit more features, and you'll be able to attach follow focus and things like that. But you're still going to spend $7,000. You get the URSA Mini Pro. Spending another $1,000, you have a camera that you're ready to run with. Now, if you want the rails, if you want those, top handle, if you want the shoulder pad, you're still going to spend another $2,000. So that in that case, you're spending, like I said, $8,000 in that case. So that's the thing that I would say, yeah, that you kind of looking to spend with those cameras. So you got to be aware of that. Unless you're just going to put the camera on a tripod and use it kind of like we are right now for web streaming or live cast or recording directly to your computer, then literally you don't need anything else because you have the power supply that it's included with the camera, so you just plug that in there. You don't need cards. You just really all you need is an SDI cable to your computer or your recording card, capture card. Plug it in there and then you can start recording. But for anything else, yeah, you can.
Do you want to take a look at a couple of submissions? I sent you one right there.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay, so let's look at some of the videos you guys sent to us.
I don't think we'll be able to get to all of them, but let's try at least two.
But yeah,
and then we'll still have, I've saved all the questions, so we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. There are some really good questions here, so.
Okay. So the first one, I'm clicking here, the first link. Maybe you can tell me, Lucas, what this one is about. Who submitted it? Since you have the info there.
No, you clicked on your own.
Oh, okay. So wait.
On your. Oh, here.
Which these two, right?
The last one. No, the last one.
Oh, just the last one here. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let me go here. Let's make sure this thing is muted. And should I play a sound in this one or no?
No, because it's a
necessary.
Rihanna song. So.
Oh, okay. It's just a Rihanna song. Okay, so it's not necessary to. So let me switch here so you guys can see. So this is the video, and who submitted this?
Just a moment. Koishik Ahmmad.
Wow, the camera moves are nice and nice angles.
And he says
when you have a good model and you have nice angles, then it's
man,
just for the sex appeal itself. I'm sure a lot of people would watch it. But I'm actually looking at it, or trying to concentrate on the nice camera moves, and it's very nice actually. I'm surprised how despite some of the angles, I'm surprised how smooth it is. And I'm guessing trying to see in the mirror. He was clever trying to cut around there because you could see in the mirror the operator a little bit. I'm guessing he's using some kind of a gimbal, but like a smaller gimbal. Did he provide any information?
He says in terms of what he used in terms of the gear now, but he says like he hasn't really been. He's been only doing filming for the last 6 months, so he's pretty new to it.
Did he mention what camera or anything like that? Or no,
he did not
nothing.
say what. Camera.
And what is this for?
I think it's just like a project he wanted to do with, just to practice things and show.
And is he asking for my opinion or?
Well, yeah, that's always people want to know your opinion, I guess. And they just wanted to actually just have a chance to show their work to other people joining us on the cast.
Like I'll tell you, I love, especially in these shots here where there's a lot of windows there, I love the use of the natural light because that's the tendency that people do a lot of times is they'll try to overlight things. Whereas in here, he's using, like, for example, that big, glaring, windows, and he doesn't worry about overexposing them. It's just like, screw it, there's nothing important out the windows, but he's using that glow, and you can see it acts like a nice edge light you can see up here, which makes things more three-dimensional, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I love about that. And even like when he's head-on looking at, for example, the girl in some of the shots, that's where the lighting thing. Now, in these shots, for me, he's still using the location lighting that's there pretty well. And I don't know whether he used any other lights, but if he had used other lights, I would have said maybe if he had added a few, like some lights, like see in here, this angle is a bit better, and maybe this was actually lit. There it's nice. It's just enough light. It still has that low-key lighting. You kind of mysterious. You don't see her face that well, but it's nice and soft lighting, and it just kind of works well with the location, I guess, lighting that was there, the practicals. And I'm not sure whether he lit this or not. But here, for example, the lighting is really nice. It's just simple. Like, it seems very natural, but you're getting the effect that you want. And this is, I guess, a fitness video. So he wants to show this girl's fit. And you can see because of all these shadows, even though they're very subtle shadows, and they're very, like I said, soft shadows, yet they're noticeable and they create definition. So you can see, like, the muscles here. You can see the veins and stuff. But it's not so sharp where it shows all these skin imperfections and stuff like that. So that's what I like about it. But sometimes I felt like it was too dark. And in here you can see, like here he's using that light as the kind of the key light, and it looks nice. So at the end of the day, it's the camera movements. If these shots were just static on a tripod, it would be a lot more boring. But because they're constantly moving, it's just there's something new constantly, for your eye to concentrate on, right? And like he has also a nice range of close-ups, wide shots, and stuff like that. I would just say that when the darker shots, if you could sometimes use lighting like the ones that were, interior, then it would have been, a bit more helpful. Okay, here, let me just rewind it a little bit. Like, see here, I love that he was not afraid to get the lens flare in there and kind of get that extreme kind of lighting. So that's good. And here, maybe it'd be better to put a little bit of like, just when you have the girl's face coming in, put a little bit of like even a bounce card, I think, like a white bounce card would have probably helped. But otherwise, yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, what's nice is the camera movements. It's very dynamic, right? So cool.
Okay, and I've sent you another
submission.
Video.
Okay, so let me.
That one has an ad playing beforehand, so you might want to skip through that. And it's from a music festival in Holland, I believe. And
so I shouldn't play the music, I guess.
Probably not.
Okay. And is that the video already?
Yeah.
Okay, so just skip this so you guys can see it. All right. So here it is. So you're saying from Holland, and who submitted it?
Just a moment. What do you want to start playing?
Yeah.
It's from Jacob Hawkins, and
any information on how it was shot?
it was shot on the Sony A6500, so with Samyang lenses, and he guess he's been using Canons before. The Sony camera, and
makes me want to drink beer. Is this supposed to be a commercial actually for the beer?
Well,
because I see a lot of the cups now. But I'm actually, to be honest, surprised how well the camera here performs, because I was in, my tests from so far from what I've seen like at the NAB with the A6500 is that the rolling shutter and it's basically so bad that I thought you couldn't use it for like this handheld on location shoot, but it's pretty well done. And I guess we can't play the music, which is kind of bad, but we'll provide the link so you guys can watch these on your own. But it'll be interesting to see it playing with the music. But I like the angles. Like, there's a nice variety of close-ups, and like I really love this stuff. I would say if you could have more of these kind of shots where sometimes you're not even sure exactly what you're looking at. You see the crowd, but then you kind of realize, oh, that's the you're on stage, and you see these kind of in the foreground the performer's legs out of focus. I think that's really cool. Seeing like all this confetti flying around, it's just, there's a nice range there. And then like those extreme suddenly close-ups of the beer, like that's what I like. It's like there's this contrast in the shot compositions. You're going from these wide angle epic shots to this extreme close-up of of the beer or of the performers. Like even here, you're seeing the shot of the beer, but you're getting still a sense of the concert and craziness in behind. So that's nice. So it's like a quick commercial, 45 seconds, but it's nice. It has a nice feel. Makes me almost want to attend that party. I don't know if it's an annual thing, but if it is, maybe we can go to Holland. You said?
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we can go to Holland and drink some cinema. Anything else?
Do you want to show another video, or do you want to?
I guess.
Okay. So sorry. So the question from Jacob was. So he's new to using LUTs and grading, and using shooting in log, flat profiles.
Okay.
And what advice do you have? How can he improve the look he's getting?
Did he say what he shot this in?
He didn't say whether he shot. Well, it sounds like he did shoot it either in S-Log 2 or 3. Now at night,
I'll tell you. Yeah, at night in general. I mean, it's not always, but in general, your dynamic range at night is going to be very limited because using artificial lights, they're not as strong, and so because of that, the lights are not as strong. There's not as big of a range between the really bright and the dark areas versus like during the day, if you have the sun glaring out. Let's say you have part of a scene that's in shadow of a building, let's say, and part of it is in full sunlight. There's going to be a big difference there in the range of light. So that's kind of what you got to be aware of, is that if you're shooting stuff at night, best thing you can do probably is buy yourself a light meter. You don't have to buy expensive ones. There's like $100. You can buy a light meter that will do the job. And if you can, show up at the location and measure what is the lighting kind of situation. Am I going to be getting this huge range of light? Because if you're not going to be getting that, then especially when you're recording on a camera like the Sony A6500, which, like I said, shoots in 8-bit image. It's an already, an image that you want to use more for the final output, not for acquisition. So because of that, you're shooting in 8 bits, and let's say then you're trying to capture this big dynamic range, which is what log profiles are designed for. So let's say, I would definitely stay away from S-Log 3. That's just too much basic information that is trying to cram into 8 bits of color. S-Log2, it's questionable. I mean, it depends on location. Sometimes there might be benefits, but in general, I actually am going to be doing a video because I shot on the A6300, which is very similar. It has S-Log3, S-Log2 profiles, and I shot on that camera a music video, like I said, at the beginning of this year in Ecuador, and the stuff that was shot outside was all done in S-Log2. I didn't even have need for S-Log3. S-Log2 is plenty enough to capture the 14 stops of dynamic range coming off the sensor. Now for night, I'm pretty sure, I have to double check, but I'm pretty sure all the stuff at night I shot was in Cine Profile 4, I think. I don't remember. Again, I'll do a video about it, so I'll update you guys. But the reason why is because that one still allows me to do some color grading and that kind of stuff. It's not as flat as the standard video, but I'm not trying to cram 14 stops of dynamic range, because that's really what log or S-Log2, S-Log3 is for. And the reason was because there was no 14 stops of dynamic range. So basically what would happen is if you're shooting stuff at night, where let's say there's only maybe, a lot of times it's going to be under 10 stops of light. So let's say you're shooting something and only has 6-7 stops of light, but you're recording in a S-Log2, let's say, that can cram in 14 stops of light, then when you load your image into, let's say, Adobe Premiere or Resolve or whatever program it is that you're using for grading, when you look at the scopes, you're going to notice that the RGB parade or whatever, the waveform, it's all the information is going to be, if it's like properly exposed, in the middle, and there's going to be nothing in the highlights, nothing in the extreme shadows. And again, because you're trying to use a codec or an image profile that tries to capture all these really extreme darks and lights, but there's none of those are in your scene, so they're all sitting in the middle. And now imagine the whole spectrum, that's your 8 bits of color. So suddenly half of it, like let's say a quarter here, so half of your image is not being used. So you end up basically wasting 4 bits of color, and then already, very limited bits, basically of color. So you're wasting all that stuff, and you're throwing it away, because then when you stretch that image and all that stuff, so that just simply means that you actually might be degrading your image more than, getting extra thing. And so what that in some instances, maybe some second here or two, you see some light bulb, and that light bulb is a little bit overexposed. Who cares about that? It's the overall image, right? You want to capture, especially when you're shooting in low light, you're getting a lot of the details in the shadows and all that stuff. I would say you're better off shooting not in log profiles in general, like in any camera, unless your camera captures 10, 12, I'd say even 10 sometimes can be limiting, but 12 bits of, for example, color. Let's say you're recording RAW, like on an URSA Mini or RED cameras, then who cares? Because you're shooting in that, and that's the most you're going to capture anyways. So then it's no problem. But if you're shooting on a camera that shoots on 8-bit, be very careful with that. So, like I said, definitely, Jacob, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jacob, follow up when I do the video about the A6300, because you're going to see my tests and kind of, what you're going to be able to see what I illustrated, what I'm talking about right now. But yeah, in general, for anybody, whether it's Sony cameras, Canon, Panasonic GH4, 5, if you're shooting in log profiles, you'll use that only in scenes that have actually a big dynamic range. If your dynamic range is below 10 stops of light, just use pretty much standard video or something slightly flatter, but not quite as flat as that. Like, Panasonic has the Senal D. Or, for example, you can use the cinema, Cine Gammas, whatever that Sony offers. They're also great for that.
Okay, so it's almost 1 o'clock, so let's try to get through as many questions as we can. Right?
Okay.
Okay, so someone here says that he's having problems with highlights when using the GH4. So, in terms of the GH5, is it better with highlights? Have you had problems with GH4, I guess? In terms of highlights,
is saying that the GH5 handles highlights better, or no? Or is asking?
He said he had problems with highlights. I guess it was blowing out the highlights a lot on the GH4. Is the GH5 going to be better?
Again, I'm going to do a chart comparison so I can really show you guys. In my tests that I've seen so far, it's not really that much better. No, and so that's what I'm saying. If you have, like some people already asked me already, if you have the GH4, should you update to the GH5? It depends. In most cases, I would say no. It's not enough of an incentive. And I would say the incentive is, do you really care about having the extra bits of color and, again, spending a lot more money on that feature, and also the bigger frame rates? Then yes, then the GH5 thing. But for any other features, like even the low light performance, it's improved over the GH4, but it's not a big difference.
What about the IS? That's also another reason why some people buy the image stabilization.
Well, yeah, exactly, and that's another thing. If you need really good image stabilization, yes, that's the camera. Then it's worth upgrading. or if you're really going to be doing a lot of color grading, then again, that's the camera that you know, the reason why you want to upgrade over the GH4. But otherwise, you know, but then again, with the GH4 you can still get 10 bits of color. You just have to use, you know, the HDMI connection and external recorder. So it might even be cheaper for you, instead of getting rid of this camera or buying a whole new GH5, maybe just buy an external recorder, you know, like the Atomos, you know, Ninja Inferno, and you'll get the higher bit rates, but also the higher bit, you know, bits of color, more per channel, but also higher bit rates image codecs like the ProRes. So that might be a bigger advantage, and it might cost you less in the end. But that's, yeah, again, you know, if you care about that, having that plus the slow motion, the bigger slow motion, because the GH5 already has nice slow motion, and you know, a better, you know, good image stabilization, then that's probably where you want to update. Yeah, I mean, you got to be very careful with highlights in any camera, even, you know, cinema cameras like the one we're using right now is the URSA Mini here to get our shot, and we always use we actually use different tools. Here I have, that's one way of you doing it. You can use a light meter, but here let me just kind of, without bringing my whole room down, I'll show you guys. This is test chart here that I got from X-Rite. I hope you guys can see it well, and you can use a, you know, like a kind of a test chart like this, video test chart. And this is the reason why I have this in the studio, is whenever I set up my shots, even like before this live stream, I'll set it up here and I can see exactly what exposure I'm getting, and this way set your zebras to like 90% in your camera, and most cameras will have zebras, including a GH4 and GH5. And then here you have this white that's like 100% white, so you want to make sure that, yes, that white maybe is already in the zebra range, but this gray, definitely you don't want that to be in the thing. And actually I would even say you can even set it to like 80% this way, zebra, and this way, you know, if the zebra is showing up on this gray pattern here, it's, your image is going to be overexposed and your highlights going to be clipping. But if it's pure white, which sometimes you just have, somebody has a white t-shirt or whatever, that is okay, that is clipping, right? You just don't want to have like the skin tones and stuff, like have these glaring highlights on there. So that's kind of where you can use charts like that. You can also use, like I said, you can use a light meter to kind of help you get the better exposure. And the last thing is false color, which the GH4 doesn't have, GH5 has actually. But actually you can use it, I think it's even better using it on like a monitor like this. So if you have the GH4, probably I would say, yeah, get the Atomos Ninja Inferno, mount it up here, you'll get a better display, you'll get 10 bits out of your camera, ProRes, you know, codecs, all that stuff. Plus you can turn on false color and you can see exactly what your exposure is and if you're blowing out the highlights. Next question.
Sorry, yeah.
A lot of questions I see.
Right.
The chats are active.
Okay, so regarding the GH5, what are your thoughts on using it with the KMTV rig versus a stripped down setup with just the lens and like a cage, less expensive cage?
It's I'll tell you guys, it's not a big difference in terms of, I'm saying, whether it's convenient or inconvenient. Here, let me see. Actually, this I know I tightened pretty hard. The monitor here on the top, but if I could get that off. Let me see, grab my tool here. The thing is that I don't mind using the cage because this cage is so light. The only thing, and that's the reason why I'm saying that I might probably end up changing to the other KMTV cage, is because I'm not using the audio module, and so I don't need this handle that's here kind of like extended and that accommodates the audio module. So, because for me, one thing would be nice is that if I can quickly remove this handle, the top handle. And if I remove that top handle, then the camera is pretty much, you know, with the cage or not, is the same. So it doesn't add much to the weight. This cage is very, very light. You'll be surprised just how light it is when you get it. So with the cage or without the cage, it's not a big weight difference. So then it's kind of nice having that extra, that cage, because in case you need to attach a handle, then like I said, the other cage they offer has a quick release handle. So then I would just remove the handle, but if I need it, I attach it. I have the handle. I can walk around with the camera easier. Also, I have a hot shoe mount here on the camera, but I can have an extra hot shoe mount up here on the side, and also the handle has, you know, a hot shoe mount. So that's a nice thing. If I wanted to get, you know, another monitor or something, then you could see I could attach it easier here or any other little accessory, because you have all these 1/4-20 and 3/8 basically tapped holes all around it. So that's the nice thing, and also it just protects your camera. Like, I mean, you know, if you drop it, there's less of a chance that the camera gets damaged because you have this cage kind of protecting it. So that's the cool thing about the cage, is that it's not doesn't get in the way. But like I said, I'll probably just change it out to the other one, the other cage that KMTV has, which is identical to this, except the top handle's removable, but at the same time it does not support then the audio module.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so for independent films, are the DSLR cameras with crop or full frame sensors, are they like good enough, you know, to then be able to show the final product on a big screen, cinema screen? Using DSLRs with a crop or full frame.
Yeah, I mean the whole crop or full frame, that has nothing to do with the really like.
But like a smaller, bigger, you know, even shooting on the on the
Micro Four Thirds
crop 2, I guess, you know.
Yeah, I mean I'll tell you that it's if there's been plenty of movies shot on smaller image sensors, and most films in history have been shot with what's called a super 35mm image sensor, which is actually smaller than full frame, like Sony A7S or Canon 5D. So in a way, you don't need to have that full frame sensor. That's not what will really determine thing. I mean, as long as you're staying, I would say, within the Micro Four Thirds or bigger image sensor, you can get that cinematic shallow depth of field. So I would say the big thing is, can you shoot with the smaller image sensors and I guess the codec? Yes, you can. It's just like I said, you got to be aware of the fact that if you're shooting with the camera, like the Sonys or most basically DSLR, DSLM type cameras, you're shooting in an 8-bit codec, so you kind of want to get as much of your look directly in the camera. Avoid shooting log if you can, because you're just going to be degrading the image quality, and it might look okay on an 8-bit television, you're watching it on a small screen, but once you take an 8-bit image that you shot, you heavily color graded it, let's say because it was shot on log, and on top of that you did your creative color grading, and then you output that stuff and put it out on a big screen, then you're going to see a big difference. So that's the thing I would say that you want to be careful with doing. And I actually have we on our website we have like various color grading LUTs. And I have some LUTs that are like, for example, the new ones we released are famous movies LUTs. You guys, if you haven't seen it, you should probably check it out. There's a trailer, which maybe we'll just provide again a link for it in the description. But basically, it's these LUTs or lookup tables that you apply to your footage, and you'll see that in the ones that are basically the famous movies LUTs, they're kind of, I would say, safe color grades, meaning I adjusted that so that they work basically with Rec 709 footage or standard video footage. So whether you shot with standard video, like if you're just shooting any of these cameras in standard image profile, it will just work directly. You apply these LUTs, and you'll see that it's gonna give you a unique look, but I'm not pushing that image there with those image profiles to the point where the image starts breaking. You can also, by the way, use those LUTs with any camera, whether you're using a GH5, GH4, Sony, and S-Log, like any log profiles, because I have these presets where you can then apply it to these different log profiles. But like I said, it's even if you're shooting standard video, 8-bit codec, you can still use these LUTs because they're, like I said, I color graded them, but not to the extreme where the image starts breaking down. But for example, I have this other product, the Cinecolor LUTs, which has like 40 profiles, right? Like image kind of color filters. And some of them are very subtle, and they'll work again with that footage, but some of it is really getting strong. Like it's really because it's just simply these are looks that I created over the years based on some projects that I worked on, and because some of these are really punchy, really strong kind of color grades and color kind of that they're pushing, what's going to happen is if you apply that to an 8-bit image that's, let's say, also on top of that heavily compressed and all that stuff, you're going to see those artifacts quicker. And especially then if you take that image, blow it up on a big screen, it's just going to be a little bit more unpleasant to watch. So you got to be careful with that. And that's what I'm saying, having a higher bitrate image, but also better codec and all that stuff is definitely going to help you avoid some of those things. Now, having said all that, like I said, that's like from a point of view of a cinematographer. It's like when you're really picky, you're going to notice those differences. But I'll tell you guys, there's, the Blair Witch Project, right? The movie that was shot on VHS and was actually color graded. It was horrible looking. Like me, I couldn't watch that movie and just without cringing. Guess what? Most people didn't care, because most people, the general movie-going audience, just wants to see a good story. And yes, if you can provide a good story that's beautiful looking, that's great. But even if it looks like video, if it's a good story, they're going to watch it. So you can shoot on any cameras, even the old video cameras, a movie, It just depends on what look you're going for, right?
But traditional film cameras, Hollywood cameras, where they had the size, the sensor was, or the film, I guess, was the cell was about the size of a APS-C digital camera, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So about the size of like Sony A6200, 6500,
So
Canon FS,
so the
Sony 70.
GH4, they're almost the same size, so it's not a it's
so
not really a concern, right? So
that's not a concern.
Now you want to have some good glass and so on for
Exactly. So it's all about, I would say, more than the cameras. Actually, the lenses you're using have a huge difference. Like I did some tests with the Panasonic GH5 with the anamorphic lenses, and it was funny because some people were like, "Oh, I thought Panasonic GH4 is sharper." And it's like, well, that's the whole point with those lenses. Those lenses, anamorphic lenses especially, stretch your bokeh, for example, vertically. So you're seeing images that look like they're extra kind of more blurry, and even the highlights sometimes get kind of stretched vertically. So you're, like I said, you're creating an overall softer image. The edge of those any anamorphic lenses, I don't care which ones they are, whether it's the SLR Magic, which are semi-affordable, around $2,000-$3,000 per lens, to like the ones that are like used on big budget films. I like say Panavision lenses even that they used, anamorphic Panavision lenses they used on movie La La Land. It's they're very expensive, $30,000-$40,000 per lens, but they have soft edges. They're not. That's what anamorphics do. And why would you shoot with that then? Well, because you're going for that look. But that's what I'm saying. It's those lenses that define that and really, create that look in the end. Because the cameras these days, all of them capture nice, sharp images, especially cameras that shoot 4K. I mean, it's our eyes, I would say, even can't see that well, that sharp, especially when it's on a small display.
Now when you were talking about the Senal LUTs, right, that you've used, those are LUTs that you actually used on your projects, right?
Yeah.
And you said when you apply them to an 8-bit, the ones that are bold, more
they're
more
really strong. Yeah, most of them will work.
If you apply them to an 8-bit image, then might be a challenge. But
the
projects you did, aren't most of them in 8-bit when you use them?
Well,
actually?
No, some of them were not.
Oh,
like that was the whole thing. Some of them I shot on the red camera, right, or on URSA's, and that was the reason, is I was able to apply those things. But there was a.
I guess you can also decrease the intensity of
exactly.
The light, right?
Yeah, that was going to say that if you're with any of these LUTs or grading thing, I would just say, if you're taking any footage that you shot on a kind of more affordable cameras that shoot an 8-bit image codec, and especially ones that are like not ProRes at least, but like something lower quality, or it's 100 megabits or lower. If you take that image and you push it too far, you're gonna see it starts breaking apart. But with any of these LUTs, the cool thing these days is like most of these programs natively will or with a little plugin will support these, and they'll allow you to adjust the intensity. So I would just say, whether it's a LUT that you're applying or you're just doing your own color grade, especially if you do it like in Premiere, I like to do it as an adjustment layer, and then you can overall the whole look, you can adjust how strong you want that look to be. And if it's too much and it's really trying to break the image down, just dial down the intensity of it, and then it's gonna look good.
Okay, obviously whenever we talk about GH5 we have to talk about the autofocus. So question here is, but we can right away talk about the GH4 too. Do you recommend it, the GH5 on a gimbal? Now maybe you can just talk about that the fact you've been using GH4, which doesn't have a good autofocus at all on a gimbals, right, for a long time. So.
Yeah, I mean it depends, I guess, what you're doing. If you're doing stuff where like what I do, right, where it's staged, you're doing music videos, films, whatever it is, but it's a stage production, meaning you arrange the actors where they're going to be, where they're hitting their marks, where the camera's going to be, then most of the time you can get away with not using basically autofocus, or not even that, but just using a locked focus, right? In some cases you want to be able to adjust focus while you're going, but then you need a second operator, so you'll put a wireless follow focus system, or like for example the Aputure has a really nice adapter actually for micro four thirds and E-mount cameras, where you can basically put Canon glass on it, and you can remotely, it's very small, and very remotely you can adjust the focus. Then that's where you'd have another operator. But a lot of times I don't even bother with that, because having another operator means he has to also have a monitor to look at it, so then you have wireless video system. It just gets a lot more complicated. So what I do is, let's say I'm getting a gimbal shot, and when I'm walking, let's say with Lucas here, then I kind of figure out how far the camera is going to be. I set my focus to that position, and then that's it. And you can have nice and shallow depth of field still, and it's going to look good as long as I change this distance. I mean, don't change the distance between me and Lucas. I can move the camera around him. I can change the angle. I just don't want to come closer or further away from him. If I move the angle around him, but I keep the same distance from him, he's always going to look sharp. So that's how just having one focus is good. I would say autofocus, where it's going to be good is for stuff we're doing that's live events, right? You don't know what's going to happen, and you might have to sometimes zoom in really, close to, let's say, and have focus, or just basically moving closer to somebody and get focus, and then have to go back and get a wide shot and still have that shot in focus. That's where autofocus is good. And so far, I've only used autofocus on the kind of work that I do only one time. And it wasn't 100%. It was on the Sony A7S II. It was amazing, I'll tell you, because I was able to register the face of the singer, and it was for a music video I did, Never Broken, with Anna Sizen. I have a whole bunch of tutorials about how we did that and stuff, and actually how I shot with the gimbal and we were shooting specifically these scenes in Central Park, not Central Park, Times Square in New York, and there was a ton of people around. And what was amazing is that I was able to register her face in the camera, so the camera would actually recognize her face among all these other faces, and I was able to follow her, and 90% of the time, somewhere around there, the shots were in focus. But there were some moments where it wasn't in focus, but I knew that I was going to be shooting, running around crazy, and just use a second here, a second there from this shot, from that shot. So I knew that at some moments where out of focus, I would be okay. But otherwise, I would never rely on autofocus. So that's why for me, autofocus is not a concern. For those of you who are maybe vloggers, you want to go around like this, then quickly switch to something else, and then back to you, and have that shot in focus. Home videos, or like I said, any other situation, maybe where, like I've heard some people use it for wedding videos, where they're like things are happening and stuff, but they can again, like I say, track the face of the bride. Make sure that she's always in.
Or maybe the bride starts to run away. You want to capture that.
Right,
maybe she doesn't make it to the altar.
Exactly.
You want to capture that.
That moment, that special moment. If that happens, then probably that's where autofocus might be good. And then that's when you don't want to look at the GH5, right?
Right.
Because you've done tests and you've also were like, you thought you had it figured out, and then you're like, oh shit, and then. Lucas discovered some interesting things about it. He did a whole video, so you guys should check out the video on his YouTube channel. But it's like I said, the GH5 is still not ready for prime time with this camera, and it should be, because like I said, if this was, I would say 3 years ago, I would say who cares? It's autofocus. It's never gonna work. But now we have cameras, like the Sony A6500, like the Canons, like the Canon, some of them, amazing, amazing, well. Exactly. So. Those cameras, there's this competition, and there's a need now. People are seeing, well, there's this amazing tool, so people are using it. So that's where Panasonic, definitely has to step up their game and fix it. Maybe they can, I don't know, but it's maybe it's something they can fix with a firmware update. But
in 60 frames, when you shoot with 60 frames, I mean, it's pretty close.
Pretty close, but it's still not.
It was the pulsating background that's
exactly, yeah. Right. That's really what it was. Is it still? So I think that can be in 60 frames per second recording with this camera. I think the autofocus will be fixed by Panasonic, so this just stops the stupid pulsating, because it's like it keeps it focused and
it goes fast. Focus
fast,
fast,
I remember you would put things in front of your face, like close to the camera, and would focus fast and would focus. So that worked, except it always had this little it would still keep the face in focus, but it seemed like the background was pulsating a little. So that's one thing that Panasonic just has to fix. I'm pretty sure that can be fixed with the firmware update, but whether getting it down to, working it well, it's 24 frames per second, we'll see.
Doesn't look like it. I wouldn't hold in my breath. Okay, in terms of just a couple more questions, so we'll try to get here. In terms of shooting action films and music videos, which one would you recommend? The Sony camera or the GH5?
Shooting action films
and music videos.
And music videos.
And our music, I guess, or we can separate it, if it makes sense.
It's you can use both. I would say definitely with music videos, you can do some slow music videos and all that stuff. I've shot actually a music video, like I said, on the A6300, and it was there was actually a lot of action. Like there was a lot of, you could say, action as in like fast movement on camera, and we had actually some fireworks going off in some shots. There's some really cool shots that I'm excited to share with you guys as soon as I have that video ready. And the camera performed amazingly, even though it doesn't have the best rolling shutter, basically. Like it's a little bit big delay. That's I would say a big advantage of the GH5. GH5 is amazing. Almost the rolling shutter is pretty much, like I said, barely visible in really extreme situations. But even better is the URSA Mini, for example, that we're shooting on right now, URSA Mini 4.6K. Those cameras, I mean, they're even though there are technically, you know, CMOS sensors with a rolling shutter, you do not see it. It pretty much looks like, if you guys watch my full review, you'll see that it's like almost non-existent. So that's the amazing thing about it. Sony a6300, yes, it's gonna have some rolling shutter. Sony a6500, that's pretty bad rolling shutter from my tests. So you definitely want to be careful, I would say, in terms of, you know, if you're gonna have either a lot of handheld work where the camera's going a lot left and right. If it's going up and down, you're not gonna notice it as much. Or you know, let's say if you have movement in your shot, let's say the camera's on a tripod, but you have movement in your shot, like with a lot of basically vertical lines moving. If it's just like objects moving, like I said, I had fireworks going off in this music video I shot, and then you don't see any of the rolling shutter things. But if you have things like, let's say you're on a street locked off shot and you have cars passing by, you're gonna see all the cars look kind of whoosh, skewed, you know, like that. So that's where you'd want to probably then go with a camera like the Panasonic GH4, GH5, or the URSA, for example, you know, like more professional cameras like URSA Mini.
Okay, so maybe we'll just finish by talking about.
But at the end, I would say you can do action. You're just gonna be careful how you frame the shots, because you can still do action and crazy things with an A6300 or A6500.
In terms of the GH5, the low focus, the low light performance, here's a situation where it says I shoot on the GH4 in the lowest, I guess, ISO. Is it normal to have noise in the blacks, although my ISO is set to the lowest on a bright sunny day?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing. It doesn't matter what ISO you're gonna be using. The noise, and especially depends on what image coding. If you bumped up the, you know, let's say the master pedestal and like things like that, you lower the contrast of your image. So you're trying to shoot with this, you know, a flatter image profile, or you're just shooting with Vlog. GH4 or GH5, it's gonna be, or any camera for that matter, it's gonna be, you're gonna have a lot of noise. That's why I was saying that on the A6500 and 6300, I would stay away from S-Log 3, because it always just introduces so much noise, because you're capturing dark areas that is not enough light, but then you're brightening them up, literally, essentially what you're doing. So the noise is going to be more visible, but that's normal. So you could be shooting with ISO 200 or ISO 100 and a bright sunny day. If you have something that's really black and dark, yeah, it's going to have noise. That's normal. If it's, you know, some weird noise that's like dancing and just ruining your whole image, that's probably something with your camera or the way you're treating your footage and afterwards. But like I said, seeing a little bit of noise, you can kill all that, usually most of that noise, by just taking your black areas, so your kind of shadows, and kind of darkening them even more, or crashing them, meaning then that noise is not going to be as visible, because then it just turns darker. So that's one thing that you want to be aware of. Now, if you're shooting in low light situations, you got to be careful with any camera. I don't care what camera it is, because you can shoot in a really low light situation and bump up the ISO and you'll get an exposure. But if your final exposure with really high ISO is still, let's say, in the, you know, if you're looking at like the histograms, let's say in the, you know, below 20 IR, for example, it's still going to be a noisy image, and that has nothing to do with the image sensor, but the image codec and the compression. Is just the shadows are always going to, you know, contain more of that. So because of that, you're going to have a bad looking image. I mean, I've seen people shooting on the A6, you know, A7S II, which is probably the best low light camera or consumer low light camera right now on the market. And they just don't bother putting any lights. So they're shooting with stuff like so low light, but then they expect to get that image looking really bright with color correction. So then instead of darkening those noisy shadows, they make them even brighter. And then of course what happens is your whole final image looks super grainy, like, you know, to the point where it's just kind of difficult to watch. So with any camera, I would say if you're shooting with low ISO or high ISO, let's say in low light situations or high situations, you always want to keep in mind that your final image that you're going to be recording within your codec here, or with your, let's say, you know, on the external recorder, that codec is, most of that image is not like really low video signals, basically, like below 20 IR. If most of your image is that, then your whole shot is going to look very noisy. But if your image, most of it is sitting in the middle range, then the, you know, of the IR, like basically between 20, I would say, and 80 IR image signal, then if it's sitting in there, it's perfectly fine. Now, if you have some parts that are really dark, then you just then darken those areas, but the rest of the image remains the same, and this way you'll get rid of all the noise.
Okay. And so in terms of the GH5, are you concerned about the low light capability of that camera?
No, I mean, for me, low light was never a concern with any camera, really. because I light stuff, and also I learned, like I said, to expose properly. The camera, my favorite camera is still the URSA Mini. Second probably favorite right now is the GH5, or maybe equally thing. It's just two different tools for different jobs, and then none of them are great for for in low light. And what I mean by that is that they don't come close to cameras like the Sony A7S II, for example. But there's still plenty enough. Like this one can go up to 3200, and if people are saying, oh, it's noisy, you can't use it past 800 ISO. BS. I've shot stuff with this with 3200 that looks beautiful, but again, when I show you guys these examples, you have to keep in mind that those are basically images that are, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what ISO I used, the final exposed image was within that nice middle range. And then if I want that shot to be low light kind of looking thing, then I can darken that right later. And especially when you then overshoot a little bit, I would say, and overexpose it a little bit, and then darken the image a bit, then you're always going to get rid of all the noise. So that's like one little tip that I can give you guys, is overexpose by half an f-stop or something like that. Sometimes sacrifice the highlights a little bit, but then you darken the image and you're going to get rid of all the noise from any camera. So that's why this camera is great. I never had problems with the GH4, and I've shot stuff that's like fairly low light. If you wanted to see a bit further into the night, you can put the Metabones adapter, which I use regardless because I want to use the bigger glass, my Canon EF glass. So then with the with the Metabones adapter, you're gaining another step of light. So your 800 ISO image is actually getting the exposure of a 1600 ISO image. So those are things that, like I said, that you should probably keep in mind. But that's why I'm saying it's not a concern. It doesn't matter what you're shooting. You should probably just be making sure you have enough light to get enough of an exposure.
Okay, somebody here has decided to buy the URSA Mini 4K. The question is, should he go with the EF or PL mount? I mean, you just said before.
EF, I think.
Always EF.
Yeah, PL has some advantage, but the thing is, it's going to be so expensive, and you're getting into pure cinema thing that in that case, I would even say instead of buying is it the 4K or 4.6K?
He says 4K.
Yeah, I would go for the 4.6K. There's quite a big difference in the URSA Mini 4K and 4.6K. Okay. They're completely two different image sensors. But another thing is, yeah, get the EF, because there's beautiful cinema glass now that's an EF mount. And yes, there's beautiful PL mount glass too, but there's not as there are not as many options in PL, especially not for the kind of range that most filmmakers are going to be renting for or buying.
Right. And so if somebody does go with the EF mount on the Mini, URSA Mini, they'll be able to use the Canon L series lenses, right?
I believe so.
Because that uses, I imagine that uses the EF mount. Maybe.
Oh yeah, it does. Yeah. And here's another thing. If you get EF, but like a camera with like a good EF mount, like the URSAs have nice solid EF mount, you can actually get adapters to put PL glass on it. So you can still use PL. If you have old lenses that are just PL mount, you can still use them. Versus if you get a PL mount camera, there's ways to convert it into some other thing, but as far as I know, I don't think you can convert back to Canon EF. So
yeah, I mean, the EF mount is the most popular.
Yeah.
Canon EF, so that's the best really choice.
And that just,
you can just all kinds of lenses brands you'll be able to adapt, right?
Yeah.
Right. And another thing here, because I think somebody's asking, but I think he's mistaken, because he's saying that whether you can adapt lenses to the URSA Mini I guess he meant 4/3 mount, but I mean there's no 4/3 mount on the URSA Mini, right? It's just
no. There's some other BlackMagic cameras that have the not the URSA Mini, but
the Pro. So no, URSA Mini Pro only has the EL.
Yeah, the EF or the Canon EF or the PL mounts. But there are some other like the production camera, the cinema production camera, I think, or just the cinema camera there, BlackMagic cinema camera that comes in micro four thirds, and some of their studio cameras. So those come in micro four thirds.
Okay, and then the last thing is I promised that we get asked to say something in Polish. Maybe some people don't really believe whether we are from the from that country far away.
But say what though?
So
I always feel weird.
I said we will not say the swear word that sometimes people are easily identified by. So no, cześć wszystkich pozdrawiamy.
Wszyscy w Polsce, czy Polacy, którzy oglądają nas, chcieliśmy was pozdrowić i mówimy po polsku. Nie wiem, co dalej powiedzieć.
So I think that's enough of Polish for today.
Yeah. And then also if there's somebody wants to us to speak in Spanish, then I can un poquito hablar.
Un poquito más. No, es que estamos casados a esposas, a chicas de Ecuador, entonces sí hablamos algo de español,
So, yeah.
entonces sí podemos comunicarnos. Y mi hermano le gusta pasar mucho tiempo en Ecuador, a mí también cuando hay chance, entonces. Okay, guys, don't ask us about other languages because it would be difficult.
Well, we may be, because I know you're more a little like into languages. I'm not as thing. I don't know. I just don't have this thing for acquiring new languages. I'm learning other, like I said, Spanish and stuff simply because I have to, because my family speaks Spanish. But you're what do you call it? You're learning other languages now too.
I'm using this very popular app Duolingo. This is not a promotion of it. It's just like I wanted to see how, because I always like kind of found it interesting to learn languages.
But don't be surprised
so I start to
if we do some shows in French or German, right? No.
Well, French, I should be, since I live in Canada, I should speak more French, and then and trying to pick up some German. But I think that's enough of a challenge for us today in terms of foreign languages. Yeah. All right, guys. So hopefully this was all good, and
we'll get to the other submissions you guys send in. There's some other cool ones, but we'll get to them next week, promise. And yeah, as always, just come back every Sunday noon Eastern time, doing the show, right?
Right.
And during the week we have a whole bunch of videos. Usually on Wednesday, right? We have videos, and or Thursday too. So check those out. And we actually have some cool videos coming out. Like last week we had the videos of the recreating a famous, any kind of famous classic of Hollywood films in your living room. One of them was Road to Perdition. Another one was how we did the whole Matrix, again starring my brother always. Right. And then we're gonna have some more this week, some cool tutorials about that. So
also in terms of like answering questions, because many of these questions we address actually also in Tom's newsletter, right? So we have a weekly newsletter.
Yeah.
So if you're not on it, that's also.
And you can directly ask us actually questions in newsletter too. You can email us back, but it's basically you go to tomantosfilms.com and you'll see right there on the front page, right, link for the newsletter.
In the contact section you can sign up. And also, people also are surprised that you can submit, your videos for feedback.
Let me actually show it here so people.
To our show. So you want to show that where to submit the color grading and also for the.
Yeah. So for example, if you're on our website again, tomantosfilms.com, you go in here, for example, to contact, and you'll see here newsletter sign up. So you can sign up here to the newsletter, and then you have Filmmaking Times live video review. So that's the one, right? Where you're going to submit your videos for us to review it or just show it, feature it like we did on the show today. And then the Filmmaking Times live color grading. We're actually going to be doing some live color grading. Well, I've already done it a few times, but it's basically where I color grade live on the show, so your footage, and then I export that as a LUT, so you can then apply it to your footage actually. And then there's
another one here. They're actually for news submission. So basically, by that we mean like if you have an indie project you did, small budget, especially small.
Oh yeah.
And and then there's
trying to get the word out.
You want to share basically the story, So it'd be good, if the final product looks good, and but just sharing the story, how you made it. If it's a good experience and you are able to open up about it, like tell us, exactly how it was, the truth. How it was to make the to make that project, and we would love to share that information with other filmmakers, right? Just like we have to be, it's not just about like just playing a trailer of your film. It's about like
getting some backstory, right?
Backstory, and just so there's actually so we can share valuable information, right, to others.
So that's up here with where you see the news story submission, and then if you go here,
so it's the same thing there. You can in the live section you can see our upcoming live streams, and also you can also
past ones, right? So
past ones
just
also,
click on it and we'll take you to that page so you can see today's show, and then you can see all the previous ones. You can kind of watch them, and you can also submit stuff up here and things like that. So and also those of you who are let's say, I mean, you usually should have access on your, if you have a phone and data plan, then you can always access the show and watch it live, I guess, on YouTube or on Facebook. But let's say for some reason you're anti-YouTube, you can watch us on Facebook too. So just facebook.com/TomAntosFilms.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, that's it.
Till next time.
Yeah, bye.